Sorry about that. There we go. So we should listen for their answers and try and listen for different things that we can point out that might be flaws in thinking, or if you take their idea to its logical conclusion, it leads to an absurdity, and it's like, do you really believe that? Is that what you want to hang on to? Maybe, I don't know. And then if you're able to give a different an alternative explanation, you can use step 3 by using questions. You'd be like, have you considered this? And then begin to give reasons for why you think what you think is correct. But today, one of the things that you should be sensitive to and aware of are self-defeating claims. Self-defeating claims. So this is a quote from the book on page 107. There's no need to expend energy addressing views that are bent on destroying themselves. Right? They die by their own hand, saving you the trouble. All you need to do is point out the problem and quietly watch the view commit harikari. It's or seppuku, ritual suicide, but samurais, they get the knife and they disembowel themselves. So sometimes a view will do that. Someone will make a claim and it's like, oh, that's really dumb. It just refutes itself. What does that look like? So sometimes was it Kokel in his book in Tactics, he calls this the suicide method. And well, now that can't go on YouTube. Oh well. Anyways, that's what he calls it because it's self-defeating, it's self-refuting or self-destructive. So there's two kinds that he talks about. The first one is formal, and the second one is practical. The formal is that the statement itself is self-contradictory. So every statement in English, or every statement is about something, right? The cat chases rats. That's about cats. Well, sometimes you can make a statement that is about statements at large, or about language, or about logic, or about religion, or about morality, like big, broad categories, right? And if you make a statement incorrectly, what that means is it refers back to itself and it can't, and then it contradicts itself. We'll get into it. There's another form where it's more practical, where the statement itself is not self-contradictory, but when you apply it, like you can believe it, but you can't actually act upon it. The moment you act upon it, it defeats it. So here's what some of that looks like. This statement is false. Take a second to think about that. So this statement is false, is about itself. If it's true, then it's false. Kind of. Kind of. So because it's self-referential and is claiming to be false, but it's also a statement that has a truth value, whether it corresponds with reality, right? When you say this statement is false, if it's true, then it has to be false. But then it necessarily is false because it can't be true, otherwise it's false. Yeah. Right? All right, here's some other examples. Oh, whoops. I should have done that. I keep forgetting to hit forward on my computer. All right, so yeah, this statement is false. It's self-contradictory. So because it refers to itself, it can't uphold its own standard. All right, so statements that include themselves in the claim. There is no truth. Well, that's a statement that has a truth value. But if there is no truth, then is that statement true? It can't be. But because it can't be, it's self-defeating. Right? You can't make a general claim about all truth with a statement that has its own truth value. That's how it defeats itself. There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure? Like, and it's kind of silly, right? But because the statement fits under the category of absolutes and it makes an absolute claim, it defeats itself. No one can know any truth about religion. Is that a religious claim? Well, if it's true, then you can know at least one thing about religion. That no one can know any truth about religion. But that's the only one. That's it. It's self-contradictory. Talking about God is meaningless. Is that a statement about God? Yes, it is. Okay. Well, is it meaningless? No, it's not. But it has to be if the statement is going to be true. It's self-defeating, self-refuting. Yes, sir. No. Truth is a function of language. Nope. Truth is a function of language and how it corresponds with reality. So whether or not your statement corresponds with reality favorably, it is considered. Now, your perception may play a role in how you formulate your statement about reality. And you use your perception to perceive reality. But truth isn't about your perception of reality. It's about the statements and whether they correspond with reality. Sometimes. So what does that have to do with what does that have to do with what this is talking about? Ah, okay, yeah. I feel X. Yes. That feeling. No, no, no. It doesn't. No, no, no. What you the better way to say that is your feeling doesn't correspond with reality. And because your feeling doesn't correspond with reality, the correspondence with reality is where truth is found. So if I'm a male and I say I'm a woman, that doesn't correspond with reality. Therefore, it's not true. But notice it's my statement, I am a woman. That is either true or false. My feeling can't be, I guess my feelings can somewhat correspond with reality or not, but really it's my statements about my feelings that either have truth value or don't have truth. So I would say that the furniture in your mind on how you're understanding what I'm saying here is get rearranged just a little bit. What we're talking about here is correspondence with reality, and that's what truth. Now there's another layer to truth where it's correspondence with other claims as well. So if you have lots of claims and they don't actually fit together, they contradict one another, which we'll get into next week. Like if you hold two claims that are contradictory to each other, then your beliefs should be like a boat that hold together, and each plank is a belief. If they hold together, then your boat will float. But if they don't hold together, then it sinks. That's like another, you can test the truth value of a worldview on whether it has any internal contradictions within the planks of the metaphorical ship. That's a little bit different than what I'm talking about here. We're talking about discrete statements about reality and how they correspond with reality. And if they don't correspond favorably with reality, then it's not true. And so since a statement talking about God is meaningless, if that's our statement, right? And it's about something, it's about reality. In this case, it's about God. It doesn't matter if it's meaningless to me. It matters whether or not it corresponds to the reality of God and language about God being meaningless. Yeah, I'm going to give reasons for why I believe what I believe. Absolutely. Always. So what do you mean by faith? Okay. So, hmm? So are there other things in your life that you don't see, taste, touch, feel, right? Are there other things like that that you know about, that you can make claims about? Like you gave an example, and this would be an example by experience, right? Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're doing. What are you talking about? What are you- Yeah, right. So then I think, yeah, other people responses. Yeah. How do I fit this together? Yep. Yeah. And then keep it going. Yeah. Right. So I guess what this class is about is trying to observe where someone else's thoughts or statements or claims or whatever, how they go off the rails relative to a biblical, right? It's like if a male claims to be a woman, that's not true, no matter how strongly they feel it. So what's underneath that is an assumption. And so what I'm trying to teach is being aware of what that underlying assumption is. And then once you know that, then you can go, "Oh, let me ask a question to get them to uncover that assumption." And the assumption there is that the strength of my feelings determine reality. Reality, whether you're here to perceive it or not, is going to be here, right? But so someone who doesn't agree with that, someone who, let's say, makes the claim that they're a woman even though they're a male, it's usually, I won't say always, but it usually has something to do with the strength of their feeling, and they'll say something like, "This is my truth." Right. So, right. But no one has uh, no one has a claim to truth like that because truth is correspondence to reality. So there's an underlying assumption there that needs to be uncovered so they can it's not thinking very clearly. And that's what we're trying to point out with the questions. So it's like just a second. So then it's like your underlying assumption is the strength of your feeling uh, determines the rightness or wrongness of whatever behavior it is. So I feel very strongly that um, I'm I'm a woman, say, and so I start displaying behaviors that correspond with what I think a woman is. So I start wearing dresses and I start putting on makeup and doing all this stuff. Ah, okay. Mm-hmm. Nope. So we didn't, but we didn't. Right. So, so, so what someone who is making claims similar to what you're making right now, they're appealing to a relative version of morality. So morality is determined by what I think and feel, right and wrong, determined by what I think and feel about murder, or abortion, for example. And truth doesn't care what you think it's either true or false, whether you're here to perceive it or whether you have a thought or feeling about it at all. It's still wrong because God said it was wrong. No, the reality the reality is still there. Hmm. So no. So now you've just cut yourself off from the actual what the reality is. Now we can create whatever laws we want over here, but those laws either correspond with God's law or it doesn't. And if our laws correspond with God's laws favorably, they're true and right and good. If they don't, then they're wrong and evil and we should stop them. Like we have a moral obligation to stop them. We should. All right. I got a lot to go over with here, so we got to move on. All right. So you cannot know anything for sure. Are you sure? All right. I mean, right? Self-defeating. Right. Students are statements that continuing on statements that include themselves in the claim. Oh, whoops! I should hit this too. You can only know truth from experience. We're getting close to what you're talking about. Is that a truth that you can know from experience? That you can only know truth from experience? No, it's not. So it circles back on itself and self-refuting. Never take anyone's advice on religious issues. Right, including your right. That's advice about religious issues. See that? How it yeah comes back and denies itself. People should not impose their values on others. Thank you. Right, exactly right. It's self-defeating, right? So just like there's a bunch of so here's just a bunch of examples, but here's the actual kind of process. Well, first a quote. If exactly the same reasons in favor of another's view I'll skip the parentheses, defeat the reasons themselves, then the view is self-defeating. So it could be your own view or their view. But if the reasons in favor of that view defeat the reasons themselves, then it's self-defeating. Probably sounds a little funny, but yeah. So if the reasons that you give for your view undermine the reason that you're giving, then it's self-defeating. Right. So this statement is false. If it's false, then it's true. If it's true, then it's false. It circles back around and yeah, gerbil wheels. Yeah. All right. So here's steps to point out self-refuting claim. Pay attention to the basic premise, fiction or claim. Like, all right, you're listening for a claim being made. And then ask yourself if the claim applies to itself. So just going back a couple, right? People should not impose their values on others. Okay, that's the claim. And you might go, that's a reasonable, liberal, democratic, tolerant view. People should not impose their values on others. Then you go, okay, does this claim apply to itself? That's the next step. Well, it's a should statement. Now we're entering into the realm of morality. And it's also talking about values. Should is in the realm of values. People should not do something. People ought to do something. So it is in the realm of values, and this person is trying to persuade you do something or not do something. So it's like, yeah, this person is imposing their values of not imposing values on others. It does refer to itself. So then, if it does apply to itself, does it satisfy its own criteria? Or is there some kind of internal contradiction? And then if yes, point it out with a question. Because again, tactics are all about asking questions to get people to think about what they're saying. So here are some examples, which are basically the examples we went over, but with a question after it. Oh wait, sorry. These are examples of the practical ones, practical self-refuting claims. So statements that cannot be said without violating themselves. It's wrong to say people are wrong. You're saying people are wrong, but that's wrong. Like it just, right? It's circle. So you could believe that. You could have that belief in your mind and it's not self-contradictory. But the moment you voice it out loud, the moment you apply it to somebody else, that's when it contradicts itself. You could believe, conceivably, it's wrong to say that people are wrong and then never call anybody wrong. That's not self-contradictory. But if you hold that belief and then you call someone wrong, you've just undermined what you believe. And you don't actually believe it. You should not argue about religion. If you enter into an argument about religion, just defeated yourself. Or you're a hypocrite because you're not actually holding to what you say you believe. If you believe that you shouldn't argue about religion, but then you get in an argument with an evangelist, you're not actually holding to what you say you believe. That's how it contradicts itself in practice, right? People should not impose their values on others. Again, notice it's like should, it's wrong to, like these are all kind of moral things, right? Imposing their values on others, we kind of went over that in the last one. You cannot use logic to find truth, and here's why. And then you give reasons for why. Yeah, you give logical reasons for why you can't find truth with logic. Like that does, it's like, okay. They are. Mm-hmm. They are. That's how they're that's so it's almost like it makes a claim about a general, it's like a general category claim with a particular statement. Nothing is ever like that. Even that statement. So, I mean, mhm, exactly. And what I'm trying to do is make everybody aware that it is kind of word salad, and people will say things like this. But being aware that people can say things like this and be able to point it out, they probably are unaware that they're saying something self-contradictory. So it's wrong to say people are wrong, or it's wrong to condemn people as I'm condemning you for condemning people. Like sometimes people don't see what they're saying. And just being able to point it out, it's like, oh, I'm not thinking very, I should think about this. All. Um, you should not push your morality on others. It's wrong. Okay. Like I've heard this from people, right? Talking about moral claims, and it's just like, yeah, but you're just pushing your morality on others, and that's wrong. I don't know if you guys remember, I shared a story about um, it was about tolerance though, right? And it was like, oh, we should. I was talking with a guy at work, and he was saying, you know, Christians, they go out and they evangelize the world, and that's wrong. You're forcing your views on others, right? And really, the more moral thing to do is to learn from other cultures. We should just listen and learn. We're really, really arrogant when we push our own religion, push our own worldview on other people. How dare we do that? That's wrong. You might hear that and go, "Oh, that's does seem pretty arrogant." Well, not exactly. What I pointed out is there's an underlying assumption that all cultures are good. There are things about cultures that are wicked and evil. And I believe that the morality that the Bible promotes and the gospel comes along, changes people's hearts. That's that's good and right and should be promoted throughout the whole world. It's the gospel. That's what saves people. They need to know it. And in fact, Christ commanded us to do that. So we should be about that business. But what he's getting at is he's thinking in terms of like we go in and we completely destroy cultures by imposing our Western, Christian whatever. And I go, okay, not everything about cultures is good. There are certain things about certain cultures that are evil, and when you bring the gospel to that culture, it will undermine that evil. Example was yeah, the wife beating stick that the missionary had. There's a missionary came to our church. He was a missionary to Africa for 20 years. And he had this stick that he would preach with. It was like the talking stick. You had the stick, you had the authority. Everyone was supposed to listen to you when you had the stick because it represented authority. And then at the end of the week, he told us this is actually the authority that a husband has over his wife, and he puts his wife into submission. Stick, and it's like this, about this long. It had a bulbous end on it, and it was like basically a club, and you beat your wife into submission. And the guy that he was witnessing to and evangelizing gave him the stick because he understood Ephesians 5 and how husbands should love their wife like Christ loved the church. I don't need this anymore. Take it away from me. That's how the gospel changes somebody and subverts the evil, right? But we shouldn't bring the gospel to these cultures. We should just listen. And I asked him, like, should we listen and learn from that culture, that thing? He was like, well, of course not. I'm like, then you just undercut your entire thing because it was built on an assumption that everything in every other culture is good. It's not. The gospel is good. You should keep your own religious views to yourself, as I'm telling you my religious view about keeping religious views to yourself. Right. So as I say it out loud, that's when it becomes self-refuting. So here's some examples. There is no truth. You hold that statement to be true. And then they go, it's like, okay, like really simple, just point it out. It's like you poke them and then they go, It's like that's just a non-starter. Just non-starter. So pointing out, but using a question. If you use a question, then it forces them to come up with an answer. And it makes them think a little bit. Or it may. Or they just skip over that and steamroll. There are no, so these are like the examples that we went over a little bit earlier. There are no absolutes. Is this an absolute about no absolutes? Seems like it. It's really quick. No one can know any truth about religion. How did you come to know that truth about religion? Like, those are all, right? Like, come on, here we are. You think God is on your side, but you're wrong. God does not take sides on this issue. Is this disagreement about God taking sides? Or in this disagreement about God taking sides, would God agree with you or with me? Like, well, he would agree with me. So he would be on your side then. Okay, so then God does take sides. Or we take God's side. More accurate, God is truth here. Everyone's view is a product of their own prejudices. Is your view only a product of your own prejudice? Why should I take it seriously? Come on. I do not believe in religion because there's no scientific evidence for it. So now there's a standard that don't believe anything unless you have scientific evidence for it. That's the underlying assumption. Is there any scientific evidence proving science is the only way to know? No. Like, how are you going to, what scientific test in the lab are you going to do to figure out whether the scientific method can't? It's just a method of organizing things. Very effective method, right? But so there's that. And then there's also, there are lots of truths that aren't scientific in nature, right? I can make a statement about, and I've used this example multiple times, I can make a statement about George Washington, right? And it is either true or false, meaning it either corresponds with reality or not. But it's a historical claim. I can't do any science to prove it because it happened in the past. So I'm making a statement about that. So for example, like George Washington is the first president, George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's either true or false. There's no science that will prove that. So it's a historical claim, and we use historical methods to verify or prove those kinds of claims. But if all you do is narrow your view down to just scientific evidence, cut yourself off from a lot of human, much of human. And that's foolish. Don't do that. It's also like no one actually does that practically. Close. It's wrong to try to change other people's religious beliefs. So this is the evangelism question, right? Why are you trying to change my religious belief about evangelism? If Jesus really commanded us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, that's what he commanded, and that's what we ought to be doing. But if someone goes, well, that's wrong, take it up with Jesus. I'm not the judge. I just communicate what the judge has already said. You got to take it up with him. Not about me. I'm just an ambassador passing on a message. But it's self-defeating. It's wrong to change other people's. It's wrong to condemn people. Why are you condemning me? We're condemning people. That's the judge not. Lest, you know, doesn't the Bible say judge not? Are you judging me as you're saying judge not? But it's, yeah, self-defeating. You should not argue about religion. Then why are you arguing with me about religion? Come on. You should, oh, I think I did that one twice. All right, so again, so to point out self-refuting claims, you pay attention to the basic premise, fiction or claim. You ask if the claim applies to itself. If it does it satisfy its own criteria, or is there internal contradiction? If that's a yes, point it out with a question, then move on. Like once you point it out, then it's like, oh, I need to move on and argue about something else. There's nowhere to go with that. It's dead on arrival. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let me